I paid for the lodge. That's the first thing you need to know. My son Daniel booked it under his name, sent out the invitations with his wife's flowery handwriting all over the envelopes, but I paid for it. $3,000 for a weekend reunion in the Catskills, non-refundable deposit, and when I asked if they wanted to split it, Daniel laughed like I'd told a joke. "Dad, come on," he said over the phone. "You don't need to worry about that stuff anymore." Anymore. Like I was retired. Like I was done. I'm 52 years old. I own a 2011 Honda Accord with a crack in the windshield and a gym membership I actually use. I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Poughkeepsie with beige walls and a landlord who texts me every month to say the rent's on time, like he's surprised. My life looks small. I designed it that way. I arrived at the lodge on Friday evening, 6 hours after everyone else. The gravel driveway crunched under my tires, and I could see them through the windows. Daniel, my daughter Rebecca, their spouses, a few cousins I barely recognized. They were laughing, drinking wine that cost more than my car payment. The lodge was all exposed timber and floor-to-ceiling glass, the kind of place you see in magazines and never think about actually visiting. I parked at the far end of the lot, away from the Range Rover and the Tesla and the BMW that probably belonged to Rebecca's husband, Kyle. I sat in my car for a minute, hands on the wheel, watching them through the glass. They looked happy, successful, like a commercial for life insurance or investment portfolios. Daniel saw me first. He waved this big theatrical wave like he was flagging down a rescue boat. I grabbed my duffel bag from the trunk and walked up the stone path. The air smelled like pine and money. "There he is!" Daniel opened the door before I could knock. He was wearing a cashmere sweater, the kind that costs $400 and looks like it costs $40. His hairline was receding faster than he probably wanted to admit, but he'd grown a beard to compensate, neat and trimmed like a hedge fund manager. He pulled me into a hug that felt rehearsed. "We were starting to think you got lost." "Traffic," I said. "On a Friday? Brutal." He stepped back and looked me over, his eyes catching on my jacket, a North Face knockoff I'd bought at an outlet mall 5 years ago. Come in, everyone's here." Everyone. The word sat heavy in my chest. Rebecca was standing by the fireplace talking to her husband. She was 30 now, wearing jeans that probably cost more than my monthly groceries and a silk blouse that caught the light. She'd always been beautiful, even as a kid, but now she looked polished, expensive, like someone who'd never eaten ramen for dinner because the checking account was empty. She saw me and smiled. "Dad!" She crossed the room and hugged me, and for a second, I let myself believe it was real. "How was the drive?" "Fine. You should have left earlier. We've been here since noon." "I had some things to finish." "Things?" Daniel laughed from behind me. "Dad, you're retired. What things?" I didn't answer. I set my bag down by the stairs and looked around. The lodge was bigger on the inside than it looked from the road. Vaulted ceilings, a kitchen island the size of my living room, leather furniture that didn't squeak when you sat down. A fire was going in the stone fireplace, and someone had put out a charcuterie board with cheeses I couldn't pronounce. "This place is nice," I said. "Right?" Rebecca's husband, Kyle, appeared beside her with 2 glasses of wine. He handed one to Rebecca and nodded at me. "Daniel found it. Got a great deal, apparently." $3,000 for the weekend," Daniel said. "Split it with the cousins. Totally worth it." I didn't correct him. I just nodded and walked toward the kitchen. There was a cooler on the counter filled with beer, craft IPAs with names like Hoppy Ending and Bitter Truth. I grabbed one and twisted off the cap. "Dad, there's wine," Rebecca said. "Kyle brought some really nice bottles." "I'm good." Daniel laughed again. That laugh, I'd been hearing it for 30 years, and it had always sounded the same, just a little too loud, just a little too long. "Still a beer guy, huh? Some things never change." I took a sip and leaned against the counter. The cousins were on the couch, scrolling through their phones. I didn't recognize most of them. My brother's kids, probably. People I'd sent Christmas cards to once a decade and never heard back from. "So, Dad," Daniel said, pulling up a stool across from me. "What's new? How's the apartment?" "Fine." "Still in Poughkeepsie?" "Yeah." "Rebecca and I were talking," he said, glancing at his sister. "We were thinking maybe you'd want to move closer. To us. There are some nice places near Westchester. Assisted living, but the good kind. Like condos with services." I set the beer down. "Assisted living? It's not like that," Rebecca said quickly. "It's just, you're alone up there, Dad. And we worry." "I'm 52. "We know," Daniel said. "But still, it's something to think about." Kyle cleared his throat. "My mom's in one of those places. She loves it. Community, activities, all that." I looked at him. Kyle was tall, blonde, the kind of guy who rode crew in college and still talked about it at parties. He worked in finance, something to do with hedge funds or private equity. I could never keep it straight. He'd married Rebecca 3 years ago in a ceremony that cost more than my car. I'd given a toast, said all the right things, smiled for the photos. "Your mom's 78, I said. "Right, but I'm 52. Daniel held up his hands. Okay, forget it, just a thought." Rebecca sighed and sipped her wine. "We're just trying to help, Dad." "I know." Dinner was at 7. We sat around a long wooden table that could have seated 12, and someone, probably Daniel's wife, Lauren, had set out candles and cloth napkins. The food was catered: roasted chicken, fingerling potatoes, some kind of kale salad that tasted like lawn clippings. Everyone talked about their jobs, their vacations, their kids. Daniel and Lauren had 2 boys, 8 and 10, who spent most of the meal on iPads in the corner. I ate quietly and listened. They didn't ask me about work. They didn't ask me about anything, really. I was just there, at the end of the table, like a piece of furniture someone forgot to move. "Dad, you're quiet," Rebecca said, halfway through dessert. "Everything okay?" "Fine." "You sure? You seem, I don't know, distant." Daniel laughed. "He's always distant. That's just Dad." Everyone laughed, even Kyle. I finished my beer and stood up. "I'm going to turn in." "Already?" Lauren looked at her watch. "It's only 9. "Long drive." I grabbed my bag and headed upstairs. The lodge had 5 bedrooms, and mine was the smallest, at the end of the hall. It had a twin bed and a window that looked out over the woods. I closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall. They thought I was broken. I could see it in their eyes, hear it in their voices. Poor Dad, living in that tiny apartment, driving that old car. No girlfriend, no hobbies, no life. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. There was a list there, 23 items long. I'd been adding to it for 10 years. Little things, big things, dates, times, names, receipts I'd kept, emails I'd printed, photos I'd saved. I scrolled through it slowly, like reading a bedtime story. Then I opened my contacts and sent a text. "Still on for tomorrow?" The reply came in less than a minute. "Absolutely. What time?" I smiled. Not a big smile. Just a small one, the kind you make when you're alone and no one's watching. "Noon," I typed. "Lodge is easy to find. I'll send the address." I hit send and set the phone on the nightstand. Downstairs, I could hear them laughing. Music started playing, something upbeat and forgettable. Someone turned it up. I lay back on the bed and closed my eyes. They thought I was broken. They had no idea. The morning came cold and gray. I woke up before everyone else around 6 and went for a run. The lodge was surrounded by trails, narrow dirt paths that wound through the trees and disappeared into the fog. I ran for an hour, pushing myself harder than I needed to, until my lungs burned and my legs felt like concrete. When I got back, Daniel was in the kitchen, making coffee. He was still in his pajamas, flannel pants and a t-shirt from some 5K charity run. He looked up when I walked in, surprised. You run? Every morning. Huh. He poured himself a cup and leaned against the counter. I didn't know that. I grabbed a glass of water and drank it in 3 long gulps. My shirt was soaked through, sticking to my chest. I could feel Daniel watching me, trying to figure something out. You look good, Dad, he said finally. I mean, for your age. Thanks. No, seriously, you're in better shape than I am. He patted his stomach and laughed. I keep meaning to join a gym, but you know how it is. Work, kids, life. I set the glass down. Yeah. He poured a second cup of coffee and slid it across the counter toward me. So, what's the plan today? I was thinking we could do a hike. There's a trail up to a lookout point. Supposed to be amazing views. Sounds good. Great. I'll tell everyone at breakfast. He paused, then added, You know, Dad, I'm glad you came. I know things have been, I don't know, weird, but it's good to have you here. I picked up the coffee and took a sip. It was too hot and I burned my tongue, but I didn't flinch. Thanks for inviting me. Of course, your family. Family. The word tasted bitter, like burnt coffee. Breakfast was chaos. Everyone woke up late and stumbled into the kitchen looking for coffee and ibuprofen. Someone made pancakes, and someone else burned the bacon. The kids screamed and ran around the living room, and no one told them to stop. It was loud and messy and exhausting, the kind of scene you'd see in a movie about the holidays. I ate standing up by the window, watching the fog lift off the trees. Dad, sit down, Rebecca said, waving me over to the table. There's plenty of room. I'm good. She frowned, but didn't push. Lauren brought over a plate of pancakes and set it down in front of Daniel's kids. Eat, she said, her voice sharp. We're leaving in 30 minutes. The hike was supposed to start at 10, but we didn't leave until almost 11. Everyone had to change, find their hiking boots, argue about who was driving. Eventually, we piled into 2 cars, Daniel's Range Rover and Kyle's BMW, and headed up the mountain road. The trailhead was crowded with families and couples in matching fleece jackets. We signed in at the ranger station, and Daniel led the way, walking too fast and talking too loud about the last time he'd hiked this trail. I stayed at the back of the group, next to Rebecca, who was already breathing hard after the first quarter mile. You okay? I asked. She nodded, wiping sweat from her forehead. I'm fine, just out of shape. We walked in silence for a while, the sound of our footsteps crunching on the gravel. Ahead of us, Daniel and Kyle were talking about stock options and quarterly earnings. Lauren was on her phone, texting someone. Dad? Rebecca said quietly. Can I ask you something? Sure. Are you happy? I looked at her. She was staring at the ground, her face flushed from the hike. She looked younger than 30, more like the girl I used to push on the swings at the park near our old house. Why do you ask? I don't know. You just seem, I don't know, like you're going through the motions. I'm fine. Are you? She stopped walking and turned to face me. Because we worry about you. Daniel and I. We talk about it sometimes. You're alone, Dad. You don't date. You don't have friends that we know of. You just exist. I stepped around her and kept walking. I'm fine, Rebecca. She caught up, her voice rising. Are you? Because it doesn't seem fine. It seems like you gave up. I stopped. The trail was narrow here, barely wide enough for 2 people. The trees pressed in close, their branches tangled overhead. I turned and looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and I saw it. The same look I'd seen at dinner last night, the same look I'd seen for years. Pity. I didn't give up, I said. I let go. Of what? I started walking again, faster now. You wouldn't understand. She didn't follow me. I heard her stop, heard her sigh, and then I heard Kyle calling her name. By the time I reached the lookout point, I was alone. I stood at the edge and looked out over the valley, the mountains stretching out like waves frozen in time. My phone buzzed in my pocket. On my way. See you at noon. I smiled again. That same small smile. Noon. Less than an hour away. I turned and started back down the trail. I got back to the lodge at 11:45. The others were still hiking, probably taking photos at the lookout point, arguing about the best filter for Instagram. I parked my car at the far end of the lot, grabbed a bottle of water from the cooler inside, and sat on the front porch. The gravel driveway was empty. The woods were quiet, just the sound of wind through the trees and the distant hum of a plane overhead. I checked my phone. No new messages. At 11:52, I heard the sound of tires on gravel. A black Mercedes S-Class came up the driveway, slow and smooth, like it was gliding. The windows were tinted dark, so I couldn't see inside. It pulled up to the front of the lodge and stopped, engine idling. I stood up and walked down the steps. The driver's side door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with salt and pepper hair and a tailored suit that probably cost more than Daniel's Range Rover. He looked like someone who owned things, companies, buildings, people. "Jack," he said, smiling. "Good to see you." "Tom." I shook his hand. His grip was firm, confident. "Thanks for coming." "Wouldn't miss it." He looked up at the lodge, then back at me. "This the place?" "Yeah." "Nice. Quiet. For now." He laughed and walked around to the passenger side. He opened the door, and a woman stepped out. She was younger than Tom, maybe 35, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and sharp green eyes. She was wearing jeans and a leather jacket, and she moved like someone who knew how to handle herself. "This is Rachel," Tom said. "She's with me." Rachel nodded at me. "Mr. Brennan." Jack. She glanced at the lodge. "Your kids inside?" "Not yet. They're hiking. Should be back any minute." Tom checked his watch. "Perfect. We'll wait." We stood there, the three of us, in the driveway. The wind picked up, and the trees rustled. I could feel my heart beating faster, but my hands were steady. I'd been planning this for 10 years. 10 years of watching, waiting, gathering. 10 years of being ignored, dismissed, pitied. 10 years of pretending to be broken. At 12:07, I heard voices, laughter, the sound of car doors slamming. Daniel's Range Rover pulled into the driveway, followed by Kyle's BMW. They parked side by side, and everyone piled out. Daniel, Lauren, Rebecca, Kyle, the kids, the cousins. They were loud, talking over each other, still high on endorphins from the hike. Daniel saw me first, then he saw Tom, then he saw the Mercedes. His smile disappeared. "Dad?" He walked toward me slowly, his eyes locked on Tom. "What's going on?" "Daniel." I stepped forward. "This is Tom Harding. He's an old friend." Tom extended his hand. Daniel didn't take it. "What's he doing here?" "I invited him." Rebecca appeared beside her brother, her face flushed from the hike. She looked at Tom, then at Rachel, then at me. "Dad, who are these people?" "Friends," I said. Kyle stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Friends? You didn't tell us you were inviting anyone? I didn't think I needed permission." Daniel laughed, but it wasn't his usual laugh. This one was nervous, forced. "Dad, come on. This is a family weekend. We didn't plan for..." "For what?" I cut him off. "For me to bring someone? You brought Lauren, Rebecca brought Kyle. Why can't I bring a friend?" No one answered. They just stood there, staring at Tom like he was a bomb about to go off. Tom smiled. "I can leave if this is a bad time." "No," I said. "Stay." Daniel looked at me. "Dad, what's going on?" I didn't answer. I just turned and walked toward the lodge. Tom and Rachel followed. Behind me, I heard Rebecca whisper, "What the hell is Dad doing?" I smiled. They had no idea. Before we continue, hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We'd love to get to know our audience better. Tom and Rachel sat on the leather couch in the living room, looking comfortable and unbothered. I made coffee in the kitchen while Daniel and Rebecca stood in the doorway, whispering to each other like conspirators. Kyle had taken the kids outside, probably to get them away from whatever was happening. Lauren hovered near the stairs, her phone in her hand, typing something. I poured 3 cups and brought them over on a tray. Tom took his black. Rachel added cream. "Thanks, Jack," Tom said. He leaned back and crossed his legs, his suit jacket falling open just enough to show an expensive watch. "Beautiful place. You pick it?" "My son did." "Ah." Tom glanced at Daniel. "Good taste." Daniel didn't respond. He was standing with his arms crossed, his jaw tight. Rebecca sat down in the chair across from Tom, trying to look casual, but her hands were shaking. "So," Daniel said finally, "how do you two know each other?" Tom looked at me. I nodded. "Jack and I go way back," Tom said. "We worked together. Must be, 15 years ago now?" 16, I said. 16. Time flies. Tom sipped his coffee. "We were in commercial real estate development. Jack was a consultant. Best one I ever met, actually. Saved my company a lot of money." Rebecca blinked. "Dad was a consultant?" "Still is," Tom said. "Or at least he was, until he decided to take a break." Daniel let out a short laugh. "A break. Right." I sat down in the chair next to Rachel and sipped my coffee. It was too bitter, but I didn't care. I watched Daniel's face, watched the way his eyes darted between Tom and me, trying to piece something together. "What's this about, Dad?" Rebecca asked. Her voice was soft, almost pleading. "Why is he here?" "I told you. He's a friend." "Bullshit." Daniel took a step forward. "You don't have friends like this. You drive a Honda and live in a 1-bedroom apartment. You don't know people who drive S-Class Mercedes." Tom chuckled. "Fair point." I set my cup down. "You're right, Daniel. I don't have friends like this. I have business partners." The room went quiet. Even Tom stopped smiling. Rebecca leaned forward. "What are you talking about?" I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Kyle was playing with the kids, throwing a football back and forth. The sun was breaking through the clouds, and the trees cast long shadows across the lawn. 10 years ago, I said, I walked away from this family. You remember that, right? Dad, let me finish. I didn't turn around. I walked away because I was tired. Tired of fighting with your mother. Tired of being the bad guy. Tired of being blamed for everything that went wrong. So I left. I gave up custody. I gave up the house. I gave up most of my savings. I walked away clean. That's not how it happened, Daniel said. His voice was louder now, defensive. You left because you couldn't handle the pressure. You were unstable, Dad. Even the lawyers said so. I turned around. The lawyers your mother hired? Rebecca shook her head. Dad, no. You left because you wanted to. You said... I said what I had to say to keep the peace. I walked back to the couch and sat down. But I didn't give up everything. I kept something you didn't know about. Tom leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Jack came to me 2 years after he left. He had a proposal, a good one. He had expertise, connections, and a very specific kind of knowledge about real estate development that most people don't have. So we made a deal. I provided the capital. He provided the strategy. We've been partners ever since. Daniel stared at me. You're lying. I'm not. Then why... He gestured around the room. Why do you live like this? Why do you act like you're broke? Because I wanted to see what you'd do. I met his eyes. I wanted to see if you'd check on me, if you'd care, if you'd notice. Rebecca's face went pale. Dad, that's not fair. Isn't it? I stood up again. You thought I was broken, Rebecca. You and Daniel both. You talked about me like I was some sad old man who needed to be taken care of. Assisted living. Jesus Christ. We were trying to help. No, I shook my head. You were trying to make yourselves feel better. You wanted to believe I was helpless, so you didn't have to feel guilty about forgetting I existed. Daniel's face was red now, his fists clenched at his sides. That's not true. Then tell me, Daniel, when's the last time you called me? Not texted, called. He didn't answer. 3 months, I said. It's been 3 months. And before that? 6? Rebecca stood up, her eyes shining with tears. Dad, stop, please. Why? Because it hurts? I walked toward the door. Good, it should. Tom and Rachel stood up. Tom adjusted his tie and picked up his briefcase. I think we should go. No. I turned to face them. Stay. We're not done. Daniel stepped between us. Dad, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it's not a game. My voice was calm, steady. This is me reminding you that I'm not who you think I am. I never was. Lauren appeared in the doorway, her phone still in her hand. Daniel, maybe we should... No. Daniel didn't take his eyes off me. Dad, if you have something to say, just say it. I looked at him, at Rebecca, at Lauren standing in the doorway, at Kyle outside with the kids who didn't know their grandfather. I'll say it when I'm ready. I walked past Daniel and out the front door. The air was cooler now, the wind picking up. I could hear the kids laughing, the sound of the football hitting the ground. I stood on the porch and breathed. Tom came out a moment later. Rachel stayed inside. That was intense, he said. It's going to get worse. You sure about this? I nodded. I've been sure for 10 years. Tom put a hand on my shoulder. Then let's make it count. That night, dinner was awkward. No one talked. We ate leftover chicken and salad in silence, the sound of forks scraping plates filling the room. The kids ate fast and disappeared upstairs with their iPads. Kyle and Lauren exchanged glances, but said nothing. Daniel stared at his plate. Rebecca kept looking at me, her eyes red from crying earlier. I finished first and carried my plate to the sink. I washed it, dried it, and put it in the cupboard. Then I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. Where are you going? Rebecca asked. Out. Dad, it's almost dark. I'll be fine. I walked down the gravel driveway and onto the road. The lodge was surrounded by woods, and the nearest town was 10 miles south. I didn't have a destination. I just needed to walk. My phone buzzed. A text from Tom. Everything set for tomorrow? I typed back, yes. Another buzz, this time from Daniel. We need to talk. Tonight. I put the phone in my pocket and kept walking. The road curved through the trees, narrow and unlit. The only sound was my footsteps and the occasional rustle of something in the brush. The air smelled like damp earth and pine. Above me, the sky was clear, the stars bright and cold. I walked for an hour before turning back. When I got to the lodge, the lights were off except for the kitchen. I could see someone moving inside, Daniel probably, or Rebecca. I didn't go in right away. I sat on the porch steps and stared at the stars. My phone buzzed again, another text from Daniel. Are you coming back? I didn't reply. At midnight, I finally went inside. The house was quiet. Everyone had gone to bed. I climbed the stairs to my room, closed the door, and lay down on the bed. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling and waited for morning. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. Dad, we need to talk. Meet me in the kitchen at 7. Daniel. I crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. At 6:30, I went for another run. The fog was thicker today, hanging low over the trees like smoke. I ran the same trail as yesterday, pushing harder, faster, until my lungs burned and my legs screamed. When I got back, Daniel was waiting on the porch. You got my note, he said. I did. And? And what? He stood up and stepped in front of me. Dad, what's going on? What are you doing? I'm running. Don't be a smart-ass. His voice was sharp now, frustrated. You bring some rich guy to a family reunion. Tell us you've been lying for 10 years, and then disappear. What do you expect us to think? I don't care what you think. Clearly. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You know what, Dad? I tried. We both did. Rebecca and I. We tried to include you, tried to make you feel welcome, and this is what we get. I walked past him toward the door. You tried? When? What? I stopped and turned around. When did you try, Daniel? When you invited me to this reunion I paid for? When you suggested I move into assisted living? When you forgot to call me for 3 months? His face went red. That's not... It is. I stepped closer. You didn't invite me here because you wanted me here. You invited me because it would look bad if you didn't. That's all I am to you. A box to check. An obligation. That's not true. Isn't it? I opened the door. If it's not, then tell me, Daniel. What's my favorite color? He stared at me. How about my birthday? Do you know when it is without checking your phone? He didn't answer. Exactly. I went inside and closed the door behind me. I took a shower, got dressed, and went downstairs. Rebecca was in the kitchen, making coffee. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes red and puffy. Morning, she said quietly. Morning. She poured a cup and handed it to me. Dad, about yesterday. Don't. Please, just listen. She took a deep breath. I'm sorry, we should have been better. Daniel and I, we should have called more, visited more. You're right, we didn't. I sipped the coffee. It was too hot again. But that doesn't mean we don't care, she continued. We do, we got caught up in our own lives, work, kids, everything. It's not an excuse, but it's the truth. I set the cup down. Rebecca, do you know where I live? She hesitated. Poughkeepsie. What's my address? She didn't answer. How about my phone number? Do you have it memorized, or is it just saved in your contacts? Dad, that's not fair. You're right. It's not. I picked up the cup again. But neither is pretending you care now just because you feel guilty. She wiped her eyes and turned away. I left the kitchen and went back outside. Tom's Mercedes was already in the driveway. He was standing next to it, talking on his phone. When he saw me, he ended the call and walked over. Ready? He asked. Yeah. Rachel got out of the car and joined us. She was wearing the same leather jacket as yesterday, but today she had a tablet under her arm. Morning, Jack, she said. Morning. Tom glanced at the lodge. They know yet? Know what? He smiled. That you're not playing around. I looked back at the house. Through the windows, I could see Daniel and Rebecca sitting at the kitchen table, talking. Lauren was upstairs, probably waking the kids. Kyle was outside, loading something into his car. They're about to, I said. Tom opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. He handed it to me. Everything's in there. Signed, notarized, ready to go. I opened it. Inside were documents. Legal papers, contracts, bank statements, names I recognized, numbers that would make Daniel and Rebecca's heads spin. This is it? I asked. That's it. I closed the folder and looked at Tom. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. He nodded toward the house. This is the easy part. Rachel spoke up. Jack, are you sure you want to do this? Once we start, there's no going back. I looked at her. She had kind eyes, but there was steel underneath. She'd been doing this kind of work for 20 years, Tom had told me. Corporate investigations, asset recovery, reputation management. She was good at what she did. I'm sure, I said. She nodded. Then let's do it. We walked toward the lodge. I could feel my heart beating faster, but my hands were steady. This was it. The moment I'd been planning for a decade. The moment when everything changed. I opened the door and stepped inside. Daniel and Rebecca were still in the kitchen. They looked up when they saw me, and their faces went pale when they saw Tom and Rachel behind me. "Dad," Daniel said. "What's going on?" I set the folder on the kitchen counter. "We need to talk." "About what?" I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. It was a contract dated 12 years ago. Daniel's signature was at the bottom, next to mine. "About this?" Rebecca stood up and walked over. She looked at the document, her eyes scanning the text. "What is this?" "Read it," I said. She read. Her face went from confused to shocked to horrified. She looked up at me. "Dad, this is a loan agreement," I said, "for $50,000. I gave it to Daniel when he was starting his business. He promised to pay me back within 5 years. Daniel's face went white. "Dad, You never paid me back." I pulled out another document. "This is an email from you dated 7 years ago. You said you'd pay me back by the end of the year. You didn't." "I was going to." "You weren't." I pulled out another document. This one was a bank statement. "This shows that 2 months after you told me you couldn't afford to pay me back, you bought a BMW, cash." The room went silent. Rebecca looked at Daniel. "Is this true?" Daniel didn't answer. I pulled out more documents. One by one, I laid them on the counter. Emails, bank statements, receipts, a paper trail that stretched back a decade, showing every lie, every excuse, every broken promise. "This one," I said, pointing to an email, "is from Rebecca. She told me she couldn't afford to help me with rent when I was struggling 6 years ago, the same month she and Kyle took a 2-week vacation to Italy." Rebecca's hands started shaking. "Dad, I'm not done." I pulled out the final document. It was a letter, handwritten, from my ex-wife. "This is from your mother. She wrote it 3 years after I left. She told me she forgave me for everything, that she wanted to move on." I flipped to the second page. On this page, she asks me to sign over the rights to a property I still owned, a commercial building in Albany. She said it was for closure. I signed it because I believed her. I pulled out another document, a deed transfer. 2 months later, she sold that building for $1.2 million. She split the money with you and Daniel. Rebecca covered her mouth. Daniel sat down hard in a chair, his face gray. "You all lied to me," I said. "For years. You took my money, my trust, my property, and you lied. And when I had nothing left, you acted like I was the problem, like I was broken." Tom stepped forward. "Jack's been working with me for 8 years. In that time, he's made a lot of money. A lot. More than any of you know." Rachel opened her tablet and turned it toward Daniel and Rebecca. "This is his current portfolio, real estate holdings, investments, assets. He's worth just under $12 million. Daniel's mouth fell open. Rebecca grabbed the counter to steady herself. "So, when you talk about him living in a 1-bedroom apartment," Rachel continued, "or driving an old car or needing help, understand that it's by choice. He's been watching you, testing you, and you failed." I picked up the folder and closed it. This weekend was never about family. It was about this, about making you see who you really are. Daniel stood up, his face twisted with anger. "You're insane." "No," I said. "I'm awake. And so are you." I turned and walked toward the door. Tom and Rachel followed. Behind me, I heard Rebecca crying. I heard Daniel shouting something, but I didn't stop. I got in Tom's car, and we drove away. The lodge disappeared behind us, swallowed by the trees. I didn't look back. I stayed in the apartment for 3 days, didn't leave, didn't answer the phone, didn't check the news. I just sat by the window and stared at the street. On the 4th day, Rachel showed up. She didn't knock. She just opened the door. I'd given her a key weeks ago, and walked in like she owned the place. She set a bag of groceries on the counter and looked at me. "You look like hell," she said. "Thanks." "When's the last time you ate?" I didn't answer. She sighed and started unpacking the bag. Bread, eggs, coffee, fruit. She moved around the kitchen like she'd done it 100 times before. Within 10 minutes, she'd made scrambled eggs and toast. She set a plate in front of me. Eat. I picked up the fork and took a bite. It tasted like nothing. Rachel sat down across from me. Tom's worried about you. He shouldn't be. He is. So am I. I set the fork down. I'm fine. You're not fine, Jack. You're sitting in an empty apartment, ignoring everyone, not eating. That's not fine. I'm just tired. Of what? Everything. She leaned back and crossed her arms. Jack, you won. You did what you set out to do. Daniel's business is tanking. Rebecca's reputation is destroyed. Ellen's a pariah. You won. Then why doesn't it feel like it? She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, her eyes sharp and knowing. Because winning isn't the same as healing. I looked away. You've spent 10 years planning this, she said. 10 years building your case, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment. And now that it's over, you don't know what to do with yourself. That's not true. Isn't it? She leaned forward. Jack, revenge is seductive. It gives you purpose, direction. But once it's done, it leaves a hole. And if you're not careful, that hole will swallow you. I stood up and walked to the window. They deserved it. Maybe, but that doesn't mean you're better off. I turned to face her. What do you want me to say, Rachel? That I regret it? That I wish I'd let it go? I don't. I can't. I'm not asking you to regret it. I'm asking you to move on. To what? To whatever comes next. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. There is no next. This was it. This was the plan. Then make a new plan. I didn't respond. I just stared at her, and she stared back, and the silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, she stood up and grabbed her bag. I'm leaving this here, she said, gesturing to the groceries. Eat something. Take a shower. Call Tom. And then figure out what the hell you're going to do with the rest of your life. She walked to the door, then stopped and looked back. Jack, you're not broken. You're just tired. But tired doesn't mean done. She left, and I was alone again. I stood by the window and watched her walk down the street, her figure getting smaller and smaller until she disappeared around the corner. Then I turned around and looked at the empty apartment. Rachel was right. I'd won. But I didn't feel like a winner. I felt like a ghost. The hearing was scheduled for Monday morning. I spent the weekend preparing with Tom's lawyers, 3 sharp, efficient people who spoke in legal jargon and drank too much coffee. They walked me through the strategy, the arguments, the potential outcomes. The key, one of them said, is to show that your actions were justified, that you acted in good faith to expose legitimate wrongdoing. Will that work? I asked. Maybe, if the judge believes you. And if he doesn't? Then you lose everything. I nodded. Got it. On Sunday night, Rachel called. You ready? She asked. As ready as I'll ever be. You sound tired. I am. She paused. Jack, whatever happens tomorrow, you did the right thing. Don't forget that. Did I? Yes. You held them accountable. That matters. Does it? Yes. Her voice was firm now. Jack, they lied to you. They stole from you. They treated you like you didn't exist. And you made them face the consequences. That's not revenge. That's justice. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd crossed a line somewhere along the way, that I'd gone from being the victim to being the villain. Thanks, Rachel, I said. Get some sleep. I hung up and lay down on the couch. But I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling and waited for morning. The courthouse was cold and impersonal. White marble floors, high ceilings, rows of wooden benches that smelled like polish and old wood. Tom sat beside me, his lawyers on the other side. Across the aisle, Daniel and Rebecca sat with their own team, 3 expensive-looking lawyers in tailored suits. I didn't look at them. They didn't look at me. The judge entered, and everyone stood. He was older, maybe 60, with gray hair and a stern face. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked at the papers in front of him. "This is a motion to freeze assets pending the outcome of a defamation lawsuit," he said. "Counsel for the plaintiffs, proceed." Daniel's lead lawyer stood up. She was sharp, polished, the kind of person who'd never lost an argument in her life. She spoke clearly, confidently, laying out the case. I'd used company resources to wage a personal vendetta. I'd acted maliciously. I'd caused irreparable harm to my children's reputations and livelihoods. Mr. Brennan's actions were not those of a concerned father, she said. They were those of a vindictive individual seeking to destroy his own family. We ask the court to freeze his assets to prevent further harm and to ensure he can't hide his resources before the trial. She sat down. The judge looked at Tom's lawyer. "Counsel for the defendant?" Tom's lawyer stood up. He was younger, calmer, with a measured tone. He walked the judge through my side, the loans that were never repaid, the lies, the coordinated effort to erase me from the family. He emphasized that everything I'd released was true, documented, verified. "Mr. Brennan didn't act maliciously," he said. "He acted to expose wrongdoing, to hold his children accountable for actions they've never acknowledged or apologized for. This is not a vendetta. This is transparency." The judge listened, making notes. When both sides finished, he looked up. "I'll hear from Mr. Brennan directly." I stood up. My legs felt weak, but I kept my voice steady. "Your Honor, I'm not here to destroy my children. I'm here because they destroyed me. For 10 years they lied to me. They took my money, my trust, my love, and they gave nothing back. I stayed silent because I thought they'd change. They didn't. So I told the truth. And now, they're suing me for it." The judge studied me. "Mr. Brennan, do you believe your actions were proportionate to the harm you suffered?" I thought about it. "No, Your Honor. I believe they were necessary." "Necessary?" "Yes. Because if I didn't do this, they'd never understand what they did. They'd never face consequences. And they'd keep lying." The judge nodded slowly. "I'll take this under advisement. Decision by Friday." He stood up, and everyone else did too. The hearing was over. I walked out of the courthouse with Tom and his lawyers. The air was cold, the sky gray. Journalists were waiting outside, shouting questions. I ignored them. "How do you think it went?" I asked Tom. "Hard to say. The judge didn't give anything away. And if he rules against me? Then we appeal, and we fight." I nodded. "Okay." Tom put a hand on my shoulder. "Jack, whatever happens, you did good in there." "Did I?" "Yes. You told the truth. That's all you can do." I looked at him. "Tom, do you think I'm a bad person?" He didn't answer right away. He just looked at me, his expression unreadable. "No," he said finally. "I think you're a hurt person, and hurt people do things they wouldn't normally do." "Is that an excuse?" "No, it's an explanation." We walked to his car and drove back to Brooklyn in silence. On Friday, the judge's decision came down. Tom called me at noon. "Jack, we need to talk. What's the verdict?" "He denied the motion. Your assets are safe." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "That's good." "It is, but there's more." "What?" The judge issued a statement. He said that while your actions were aggressive and potentially harmful, they didn't rise to the level of malice required to freeze your assets. But he also warned both parties that if this continues, he'll hold everyone in contempt. What does that mean? It means he's tired of this, and if either side pushes too hard, he'll shut it down. I leaned back in my chair. So what do? We wait, and we prepare for trial. When? 6 months. Maybe less. I hung up and stared at the wall. 6 months. 6 more months of this. 6 more months of fighting, of lawyers, of watching my children on the news, their faces twisted with anger and fear. I closed my eyes and tried to remember what they looked like as kids, smiling, laughing, running through the park. But all I could see were their faces in the courtroom, cold, distant, strangers. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. "Dad, it's me, Daniel. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "No." His reply came instantly. "Please, just 5 minutes." "Why?" "Because I need to say something." I hesitated. Then I called him. He answered on the first ring. "Dad." "What do you want, Daniel?" "I want to apologize." I laughed. "You're apologizing now? After everything?" "I know it's late. I know I should have done it years ago, but I'm doing it now. I'm sorry, Dad. For everything." I didn't respond. I just listened. "I was selfish," he continued, "and stupid, and I took you for granted. I thought you'd always be there no matter what. And when you weren't, I didn't know how to handle it. So I lied. I blamed you. I convinced myself it was your fault. It was easier that way," I said. "Yeah, it was. But it wasn't right. And I'm sorry." I closed my eyes. "Do you mean that?" "Yes." "Then drop the lawsuit." He was quiet. "Dad, I can't. It's not just me. It's Rebecca too, and Kyle, and Mom. They're all—" "Then you're not sorry." I cut him off. "You're just scared." "Dad, don't call me again." I hung up. My hands were shaking. My chest felt tight. I walked to the window and stared out at the street. He'd apologized. For the first time in 10 years, he'd actually apologized. But it didn't change anything. Because apologies without action are just words. And words don't fix broken trust. I turned away from the window and sat down on the couch. Outside, the city hummed. People laughed. Cars honked. Life went on, and I was still alone.